Hey guys, welcome back. So in the last video tutorial you have seen that we created the implementations of application context, the IOC container, how Spring is going to take over the entire object creation and maintaining the life cycle of an object and all those things. So today what we are going to learn is something which is a very concrete concept of Spring Core, and it's being used in every interview questions. And the first question that should come up in your mind as why Spring is because of this, which is called dependency injection, right? So not going with the technological term of dependency injection, so today I'm going to straightway show you using an implementation that how dependency is injected in Spring and why it is being useful. Okay, so let's go on with the ride, right? So we have a class called data DAO. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll create a class called public, and say we are kind of very simple. Okay, we are kind of registering a user. Okay, and we are going to uh, populate all the users which are being created. Very simple, right? So before we start with, let's create a class. Okay, we'll go to new and we'll create a class, and we say the class name is user. We'll put it in the package of com.application.model. Okay, oh, my battery is running low. Okay, so we have a class of user, okay, which will have, say, two fields: private string username and, say, private string password. Very basic. Okay, and I create a getter and setters for both. Okay, and I'll use two things. One is a constructor, which is a parameterized constructor using the fields, and I'll be creating a default constructor, which is basically a non-parameterized. Okay, since we are already using a parameterized constructor, so we are creating the no argument constructor too, and also we'll have say two string methods. Okay, that's it. So let's go to the data now class and let's quickly create a public say void register. Okay, and it takes up an object called user. Okay, and okay, there is a way by which we can import the package. Since user, it is not finding the class, because we need to import the package. So one way is either hovering on this and selecting this particular thing, or what you can do is we can hover this, click on, if you double click, so you'll get the, it's a bit slow, so it's taking time. So here also we can import, or what the other option is, you can use Control plus Shift and O. So it's Control Shift and keyboard O. If you do that, Control Shift O, it will import all the relevant packages. Okay, so what it will do is, let's create a private variable, say private list of okay, list of, say, user, and say it's users. Okay, and let me write. Okay, initialize that at the very beginning. So what I'm doing is I'm just saying users dot add, and I'm just passing the user. Very simple, right? So this is one of the method we are going to create, and let's say there is another method, public, where we will be getting all the list of informations, right? So public list of user, so get all users. and what it will return is nothing but it will return the list that is available, right? Easy, right? Now, simple. My question is, we will be creating another level of abstraction that is called a data service. So currently it is in the repository. We'll be creating another layer of abstraction uh, called data service, and this client test will not directly call this data DAO, rather it will call the data service, okay, which in turn will call data DAO, correct? So let's quickly do that. So I want to create a class which is called, say, a data service, and it's in com.application.service, okay, and this service method or data service method will have something like private data DAO, okay, and it will have two methods. One is public void register user, okay, and what it should do is it will be having that user as the parameter user. So it is taking up the input parameter as the user object, and what it does is it is calling up data dot register, okay. This is one of the methods, okay. So what we will be doing is, initially I'll not do any difference, okay, or rather I'll not do any change, and I'll try to run this code, and I'll first show you what the exception is, and gradually dhire dhire we'll be learning what are the different steps we need to do, okay. So the second method is similarly public void show all users, okay, which will, you know, it will return me a list, right, list of users. So it will return me the data dot get all users, okay. So as I said, let's run it, or rather let's learn it step by step. So we'll go to client test, and instead of data DAO we'll say data service, and we'll have this data service class. So this we need to make change, put it data service, okay. We do not need this one, okay, and we do not have a display method. So what we'll do is we'll just create bean dot, okay, register user. So we need to create an instance of a user, and then we'll say bean dot you know, show all users, okay, sorry, and we'll just print this show all users, okay. So we need to create this user class. So what we'll do is, as of now we kind of take the reference of user equals to, okay, context dot get bean. So let me make it as user, and what type it is user dot class. See, this is one way of doing it, okay. There is also another way of there is also another way by which, you know, you can cast this user. So let me show you the other way here, okay. So instead of user dot class, so this context dot get bean always return an object. Now I need to cast this because I need to convert this from object to the specified class, that is user. So what I can do is I can cast this to user. So this is one way, or else the other option is you can use comma and say user dot class, okay. Now, so we don't need this traditional way, so we are just deleting this comment, okay, and we don't need this one too, so we are just removing it, so making it our code very simple, okay. I think I made a typo. Okay, now, so as it is clear from here that we need to create two beans. One is data service, another is user. So let's go to application context and let's create a bean, okay, whose ID is user. And right, any idea the class is? We'll go here, we select the user, right click on it, we'll say copy qualified name, we'll go back to here and paste this. Cool. Okay, and what is the other bean that we need? The other bean is, yeah, what is that? Data service, right? Now you tell me how to get the class. So again, we need to go to the data service, we need to select this, we need to click here, and we need to find copy qualified name. If you can remember the entire package name, you can start writing, but I always prefer that in order to get any sort of error, in order to avoid that error, we do it in this way. Okay, easy. Okay, now in user we have two parameters, right? Username and password. There are the two variables. So we can set the value in application property itself, right? How it is, I'll show you. So if I say property name and say username, and I can use a value and say the username is admin, okay. So kind of I'm hard coding it so that in the XML file itself we are learning the other way, how to retrieve the value, okay, from or how to set the value, set the parameters of a user. Okay, so the next name is password. So in the password, say it's admin and password. Okay, right. So internally what happens, we just need to focus on it. So when Spring will load this, it will see that property name username, right? So it will always call the setter method of this. So it is set username, similarly it is set password. If I make any changes over here, or if the setter method is not available in the user class, there will be a problem, it will throw up an exception. Okay, so as of now we have created the user, and we have also created the data service. So what happens if we run this code? But before running this code, I just wanted to show you what is the user. Is the user being properly, values that we provided to the user, is that being properly retrieved by Spring container, or is it coming as null? So in order to check that, we'll put this, right? So now let's run one by one. So if we run this application, right, you will see that the user is being properly retrieved from the property file, or rather the XML file, the configuration file. So in the application context itself, we provided admin and password, and here also it came as admin and password, but it is showing a null pointer where in data service line number 17. So if I go to data service 17, it is referring to null. Why? Because by default, whenever we create an object, we have not initialized it, so by default it is null. So my question is, how can we inject the dependency of data DAO inside this particular class data service? Here if I create a new object, so if I create like new data DAO, do you think there would be any error now? There will not be any error. Why? Because now this data service is not null, right? But we are not trying to create the object. The object is being created by whom? The object is being created by the Spring. So when Spring loads, it needs to understand that this is my dependency. DataDAO is the dependency in my data service class. I have a dependency. So I need to inject the object of DataDAO inside this particular class, which is known as a dependency injection. There are two ways of doing it. Number one is called a constructor injection. So number one, what will the thing that we'll do is through constructor injection. Okay, I'll show you how it is to be done. Right, I create a constructor of data service. Okay, so it's public, sorry, data service. Okay, and it will create the instance of DataDAO. Okay, and it will set the value over here. Right, my question is, if I do this and run, will it work? No, it shouldn't work, because we need to set the value. So let's see once again. If I run this, is it going to give me a null pointer exception? Let's check that out. Right, it provides me a lot of exception now. The question is, error creating bean with name data service defined in application context.xml. So if I enlarge this console, you'll get to see like initiation of instantiation of bean failed. Okay, why? Because no default constructor found. So the question is, if I create my own parameterized constructor, it's not having the default constructor anymore, so Spring will throw up an exception, right? So let's do that. Let's go to data service and let's create a default constructor too. Okay, and now let's run this piece of code. Now it gives us a null pointer. Why? Because still the data is null, because now when we are not passing any argument in data service, that means it is calling my default non-parameterized non-argumented constructor, correct? And it is throwing up the exceptions as simple. Okay, because the DataDAO is null. So what I'll do is I'll delete this non-parameterized constructor and I'll go to this application.context.xml file, and over here what I'll do is I'll just call, there's something called constructor arguments. Okay, so in constructor arguments, okay, there is something called index. Index will show which position, like say for an example, my data service can have DataDAO and comma something more, right, which I want to inject when this class gets loaded, correct? So I can use like index 0, index 1, index 2, similar. So we have only one parameter, so it's index 0. Okay, and we'll be using something called reference. That means this data service class needs a reference of DataDAO. And where is my DataDAO bean? The DataDAO bean is this. So I need to inject the reference of DataDAO to the constructor of data service. Okay, now if I run this piece of code, let's see what happens. Hooray, we can get the results, right? So if I go inside application context once again, let's recap a bit. What we are doing is, inside this data service class we have a constructor. Inside this constructor we are injecting the dependency of DataDAO. We are saying that whenever data service class gets loaded, we are kind of inject the dependency of data now inside this particular class, and for which when we are creating a bean, we are calling this constructor argument, and we are passing the reference of the class. This is actually the ID. This reference should be the ID for this particular class, and accordingly it is the Spring will now take care and it will inject the value or the dependency and let the project continue. So this is the example of constructor injection. Now there is also another way by which we can inject the value, that is called setter injection. So for setter injection, and there is also a third level of injection that is called a field level injection. We need to stay tuned for the next videos. Thank you so much for watching. Keep learning, be happy. Thank you.